Hello, my name is Petter Dessne and I work as a lecturer at the University of Borås in Sweden. This is a short introduction to music software user interfaces. I have worked with user interfaces or UIs for many years, mainly involving web and desktop applications, such as turning this into this and running a research project on UIs for electronic commerce, introducing the preferably variable, among other things. But back to the music software user interfaces. So what's so special about them? Well, all software synths, they work on the same premises. A sine wave or similar is modulated, multiplied, etc., and eventually turned into a complex synthesized sound. This means that the main thing that differs between software synths is the user interface. And as you'll soon see, they can be quite complex. I started working in the music software industry during the dot-com era, working on sheet music software. The problem everyone faces in regards to sheet music production is the input of notes. Since they can be of both different pitches and different duration, this is a very time-consuming and tedious process. Therefore, both we and our competitors worked hard to come up with smart solutions to this problem. For example, one of my ideas was that during note insertion mode, pressing shift and right arrow should fill the bar with whatever duration remained to fill in. Because pressing shift right arrow is much quicker than pressing the duration keys for, say, a dotted quarter note. There have, of course, been great improvements in sheet music software since that time, not least through the use of tablets. Now one can simply draw the notes on screen. However, this method introduces many other UI-related issues. Even more interesting are, as I hinted above, UIs for software synths and effects. For many years, they were designed to mimic their hardware counterparts. However, most of us agreed that since we can do so much more with software, why shouldn't music software have their own UI styles? And now they do. Since there are hundreds of developers and thousands of synths and effects, most of them free by the way, and since UIs are what really set them apart from one another, this is a treasure chest for UI researchers. For me, three questions arise. 1. How can music software in general be further improved using these novel UI ideas? 2. Can user interfaces from the music software world be taken to inspire user interfaces in other software, such as business intelligence software or software used in energy surveys? And 3. Can music, especially pop music, move forward through the use of these new UI ideas? Now let's take a look at a few examples of these interfaces. Okay, I'm going to start out with a multi-effect that I've created myself actually. First, here's the melody. Okay. And here is the effect in question. I know it can't be fully visible here because it's quite wide, but here you see all of it. I'm only going to use the stuff here on the right. So let's turn on some things. And these can actually be quite useful when taken together. and create some very interesting results. I'm now using a very narrow sweep here. So in other words, I can do all sorts of strange things with this piano sound. Now let's take a look at some of the popular high-end synths today. Moving from these ones, old style, to a bit more modern style, but still very much hardware looking, like this one, for example. And then to some more modern styled synthesizers. From an overview such as this one, one can draw several conclusions. For example, the complex interfaces are quite abundant here. Also, the designs are built on hardware synth conventions. How did a hardware synth built in the 1970s work? The sound metaphors are not based on reality, like waveforms, envelopes, amplitude, and so on. They have very little to do with reality. Also, the software synths are built from a technical and not physical viewpoint, so you have all these abbreviations such as OSE, ENV, etc., which has no musical meaning. This means that the musical creativity is hindered, and also that the user interfaces, they follow a kind of a convention, but is it really the right one? And I find that very interesting. Also note that since we cannot see audio, creating music software user interfaces is extremely challenging. Basically, what we're doing is to develop Photoshop for the blind. And perhaps you're thinking, can't there be any other way, like an easier user interface or a more musical interface? And yes, there have been some thoughts on this, especially lately. And I'm now going to show one of these. It's not perfect at all, but it's still interesting, and you can see how musical expressions have been given for the user to understand what the sound will be. But back to the more conventional synths. When looking at their user interface elements and design choices, these are some findings. It's very common with dials or knobs and sliders also. Browsers are used for presets and waveforms, etc., and these are often shown at all times in a synth, the browsers. The backgrounds are usually dark, which is not strange if you consider that many of the people using these synths are doing it during nighttime, so dark background makes sense. Some of them contain a keyboard on screen, and this is problematic perhaps because it takes up a lot of space, but it's also nice because it shows to the user the feedback. So you have the visibility design principle here. The labels have usually physical names such as OSE1 or EME3 or modulation or so. The structure is often clear and logical, but very cluttered. The older synths resemble hardware synths. Newer synths focus on more beautiful interfaces, and more about that shortly. Some user interface elements have evolved into smarter elements than you can see in other software, and this is especially true for dials. Like here in Fathom, a new synth, where you have the surrounding rings, and these indicate default values, the white one. So the white line is how long it is, depends on the deviation from the default value, and the red line indicates the range that the user has set for a specific value. So modulate between these two values. Double click returns to default value, and it's really a smart thing. I have personally only seen that in music software. Numerical values can be double clicked to be updated via keyboard input. Values can be updated in real time if they are controlled from music software or hardware, so you can see them moving on screen. Now let's take a look at Fathom. Okay, so that was Fathom, and actually the first time I used that particular synthesizer. So as you see, at least I felt that the user interface was extremely intuitive. By reading about 1500 posts in the user forum, I have followed the iterative process of putting the synth together. It's been quite a journey for the developer, and it's also been a very close cooperation with the users, and I'd say this is basically a school example of design-focused development. For one thing, the looks and functionality of the dials have been quite a hot topic in the discussion forum. There are many things to note in the example, such as a beautiful UI, how drag and drop works, the visualization of the chords yet to be played, the favoring of dials over sliders, the layout of controls, the use of design principles such as visibility or invisibility, affordance, consistency, feedback, and mapping, and also how the user interface steers the user towards a certain type of sound. In other words, here we have a user interface determined by how the synth functions, but also a synth whose sound to some extent is depending on the user interface. Today there is more focus on beauty and creativity than before. UIs can really change how music is composed, I think. And also, this also means that we can shape the music of the future through the user interfaces. Music software user interfaces are complex and they have their own ideals. They are built by people much concerned with user interfaces, and this is very important because this means that other software can certainly be improved by looking at both trends and also lessons learned from music software applications. So here is one of them, a reverb, very lush sounding, very spacey musical sound. For a reverb is what you get when you go into a church, for example. So you have a long reverb. Here's another reverb, and the different polygons you see here are showing the reflections of the reverb. And here is yet another way of displaying them. Very beautiful. And as you can see, we have very, very different ways of displaying a reverb. But what if these user interfaces, or the choices made here, the design principles from a music software interface, what if they were used to enhance the UI designs of, say, BI software, or perhaps energy software suites, like pictured here? I think that would lead to much better design, to much better decision making because of the better design choices. You could see a much better structure, a clearer structure, and also more telling structure of, say, business financials. And I also think that since the interfaces themselves are based on beauty, this means that people's lives in front of the computers will be improved, and this in turn also leads to better decisions. Okay, there was a lot of ground to cover. I hope that you enjoyed watching this movie and that you felt that you learned something from it. So thanks for watching.